Hello. Today we're going to start our first PowerPoint presentation or PowerPoint video over the areas of technology. You're going to place these in your notes or take notes about this because everything from the test will be straight from these notes. The video can be stopped at any time or reviewed as often as you like. The test will be over the notes, which will be over this, and STEM words. A reminder, you'll be able to take the review test as often as you like. It will be untimed, and it will show you the results of your score and tell you the correct answers. The purpose of the review test is to basically review the information and prepare you for the final test. The final test will have limited time, and you either know it or you don't. You won't have time to sit around or visit or talk or look over your notes. It's going to be very, very quick. One of our first projects will be to do a technology report. And the information that you use in your technology report will be some of the things that we're going to talk about in this video, in the biotechnology video, and the nanotechnology video. And we'll get into more information on that later. In this video or PowerPoint, we'll cover definitions of technology terms and a few examples of each. But I think this will be pretty easy and pretty obvious. You will have notes in Angel to print and record this information. We've already talked about that. The review quizzes will also be posted in Angel as well as the final quiz. Technology is divided into 6 categories or 6 areas. For the class curriculum, we'll combine them into units during the course, usually doing 2 at a time. Activities, notes, and PowerPoints will relate to each unit. And then a test will be over each unit. The first area we're going to talk about is biotechnology. And what you want to look for is the off-colored words in each video. What you need to write down on your first definition is using technology that connects to plant, animal, and human life. STEM words bio means life, and logi is the science. So one way to look at this is biotechnology is the science of life. It's going to be a little bit different than biology, though, because we're going to be using, or the scientists will be using technology to change things around. This is a very new area of technology. Within the last 5 to 10 years, this has really started to take hold, and they think within the next 5 or 10 years, this is going to be one of the big areas of technology. If you look at the picture on the screen, here's an example of biotechnology, a plant blended with an animal. This is not a real picture. If you notice down in the left-hand corner, this is from the website worth1000.com, and this has been photoshopped or photo edited. And that basically is what that website is all about. But it is a good example of what biotechnology may look like. Examples of biotechnology would include cloning. Dolly is the first cloned animal, and Dolly was a sheep. Dolly died at the old age, at the age of 4. What we learned from Dolly is that you can't believe what you see in movies and television. What we also learned about Dolly is that the clone has the genetic age of the donor. So when Dolly was born, Dolly was already genetically as old as the sheep that donated the tissue to clone Dolly. So for example, if we take a 50-year-old man and we were to clone him, unlike what we would see in the movies, the next day in through the door would not walk a fully grown 50-year-old man identical to the original. What we would have in 9 months would be a baby that has a genetic age of a 50-year-old man. So at the age of 20 or 30 years old, when most people are going to be very healthy, the clone might start getting old age diseases such as arthritis, Alzheimer's, or body aches and pains, wrinkling of skin, and genetically would already be about 70 to 80 years old, even though they've only been born for 20 to 30 years. So when we talk about cloning, there's obviously some problems that we found that are not possible to overcome right now at this time. We do have laws in the United States against cloning people, but we have cloned a lot of other things. So some of the things we're going to talk about when we get to the area of biotechnology is this cloning, some of the problems that we'll have as a result of it. Stem cell research is another form of cloning where we found out that stem cells, which are present in mass quality in babies, quantity in babies, is what causes that baby or permits that baby to grow at a very fast rate. When a baby is injured or anything, those stem cells will reproduce very quickly and heal the baby quickly. Teenagers are also going to have a lot of stem cells, although not as many as the baby. And as you age, you lose these stem cells. And eventually, when you get to be older, the stem cells have really thinned out to where there are not very many of them, and they don't repair the body as quickly as they originally did. This is a complaint you may often hear from older people. Then they say their body doesn't repair as quickly, or they don't recover as quickly from an injury or something, or they get tired quickly, or they can't go longer without their sleep. And this could be related to the stem cells. Originally, stem cell research was only done from babies, and the baby had to be dead. So for that reason, we became very fearful of stem cell research, and we didn't want to participate in it. Since then, however, we found that even old people still have the stem cells, and we can go in and we can get those stem cells out, reproduce them, put them back in the elderly person, and that person's going to have more stem cells to help them rejuvenate quicker. And this is going to be a very interesting area that we'll talk about later. Genetic engineering would be another form of biotechnology, and that would be blending the DNA of humans with plants or animals, possibly. For example, sharks do not get cancer, and neither do cockroaches. So if we can find the DNA or the genetics of the shark or the cockroach that prevents cancer, perhaps we can take that and put it into people, and we can eliminate cancer from people. While this may seem as a very bizarre idea, this is one of the things scientists are starting to work on. And of course, there could be negative reactions, so we need to be aware of that. Spider webs are something that scientists are finding out is one of the strongest materials in nature. And if we can create an artificial spider web as thick as your little pinky finger, they think that spider web could stop a jet plane in mid-air. It would be that strong. And you think, well, I've been able to break spider webs. That's not possible. But again, think of it as tearing a piece of paper. We can tear a piece of paper very easily, but when we put that paper together as thick as maybe a phone book, it becomes very difficult then to tear it apart. And a lot of things that we'll talk about in the biotechnology area later on are related to things we find in science. Jellyfish. Scientists have already taken the bioluminescent gene out of jellyfish and put it in other animals. Again, not so much that we have other animals that will glow in the dark, but what will happen when we put these genetics or the DNA in other things of what it was not originally designed. And we'll talk more about that later. Again, this is an introduction area, and we're going to kind of review things very quickly, and we'll talk more about it later. Communication technology is a process of sending and receiving information. The key to this is that the information must not only be sent, it has to be received also. Simply sending the message or sending the information and not having it received means the communication does not take place. The stem words "com" together and "shan" the act of is the act of bringing people together. And it's pretty obvious in our world today that this is a very, very big technology. Almost everybody has a cell phone, almost everybody has a computer and uses the internet. And it's widely impacted our society. Scientists say that we are currently in the information age, and that this is the #1 technology in our society today. That will be on the test, and while it's not in your notes, you might want to make a little jot down to the side or something next to the communication technology definition that this is the #1 technology in our world today. When it gets replaced, nobody knows. And what will replace it, again, nobody knows. Two of the main things that we're looking at that might replace it would be the biotechnology and nanotechnology that we'll go over in a little bit. Examples of communication technology are pretty obvious and pretty easy, and you're probably very, very familiar with all of them. The computers and internet, all types of phones, whether it be a cell phone or a landline phone, music in any way that music is produced or shared, satellites, TV and videos, and a lot of other ideas, news, books, magazines, and almost everything around you. Again, as we're going through this, at any time, if you need to stop, you can pause the video. If you need to stop and get the notes a little bit better, you can pause the video again. If you'd like to review it, you're more than welcome to do so. Construction is the next area of technology, and construction is defined as the process of building structures on site. And on site is a key word. On site defines it and differs it from manufacturing. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Your STEM words, con means together, struct is to build, and shon is the act of. So basically this is the act of building something together or putting something together. The key to this is on-site. On-site means that they are not moved and remain at that location. Now, with the technology that we have today, we can move construction, but it's very expensive, very difficult to do, and it's not very common. Although when we get into the unit on construction, we'll talk more about that. Also, we're getting a little bit of a blend between manufacturing and construction, in that you might see in the summertime a half of a house going down the road or the interstate on the back of a semi-truck, and a few miles behind that would be the other half of the house. They're going to take that out. That was all made in a factory. They're going to take that out to a location, and they're going to build it there, and then it becomes construction, and that's called manufactured housing. In today's world, you often hear of some things that are constructed being called infrastructure. And these are things that are needed for the existence of a community: roads, bridges, dams, the sewers, and everything else. And again, we're going to talk about this later. One of the mistakes that our politicians and our people have made in the last 50 years is that this infrastructure is to the limit of its age, and it's starting to collapse. They're starting to fail. We're going to need tremendous amounts of money in the future to repair these, and unfortunately that's going to come from taxes, and unfortunately your generation is probably going to get stuck paying those taxes. So we have some big problems coming up with that. One of the things that might change is that we might really evaluate, do we want to change roads and go to alternative forms of transportation? That's something that we're going to look at again when we get into construction later. Examples of construction technology would include apartments, bridges, domes, houses, roads, sewer systems, and again, everything else that's constructed around you. The picture on the right is one that I found on the internet. I don't know if it's real or not. It's a very cool idea, but shows some type of decks and everything on the side of a mountain. And it could be linked to a hotel, I'm not sure, but it's a cool example of what construction technology might look like. And you have construction all over your neighborhood, all over the community, and you see it everywhere you go. Manufacturing technology is simply the process of making things. The STEM word man means hand, and originally most of these things were made by hand. In today's world, we're using more computers, more robotics, more machines, but we still consider it, and we still keep that original STEM word of manufacturing, in that somewhere along the way it's usually done by hand. Manufacturing is usually considered to be done in a factory, and probably 97% of it is done that way, which is a specific building for that purpose. However, it can also be done at home or somewhere else. And you might know somebody that makes things in their basement, their garage, or in a special area in their house, and do sell those, especially with the amount of online selling that we can do in our world today. Now, for many years, when I talk about manufacturing, I always tell students, this is not an area that you probably will go in. We've lost a lot of jobs in manufacturing to machines and to robots. A lot of them have been sent to other countries where they can get by much, much cheaper. I've recently been reading in the news where they're unhappy with the quality of the work done by the cheap labor in other countries, and they're gradually starting to come back into this area. So this is an area that you might be interested in going into if you're not going to go to college and go into another type of occupation. There is a online site called connexus.org, which is trying to get more young people interested into this area, and we'll look at that at some of our activities later on when we get into manufacturing. And a lot of the media lately has been saying that there's a growing need for young people to go into this area of technology. So it is one you might want to look into if you're interested. Examples of manufacturing technology are, well, just about everything you see around you. Chairs, pencils, paper, electronics, everything you see around you that is not human, animal, or plant would be probably manufactured. And again, we'll talk more about this when we get into the area of manufacturing, but we take those natural things like wood, we process them or change them, make them man-made, turn them into lumber, turn them into furniture, and make things out of them. So we start off with natural and we evolve that to manufacturing. Now I want to point out manufacturing and construction are very similar and many of the materials will overlap. For example, bricks are manufactured and then they're used in construction. So at the factory they make the bricks, they transport them out to the area where the building is being put up, and then they put them together in a form of construction. So the bricks would be both manufactured at one point and constructed at another point. Doors, windows, and lumber will be similar to this. They start out as natural materials and become man-made or processed materials. So a lot of things can overlap when we're talking about this. Nanotechnology is designed and is defined, as the design and development of very, very, very tiny tools and machines. And this is another brand new area in technology. It's just started in the last 5 to 10 years. Purdue University has just created a $90 million building about 5 years ago to study nano and biotechnology. And this is a brand new area. Both nano and biotechnology are areas where starting out in the business world, once you get out of college, you're very likely to make upwards to $100,000 or more a year, and that's starting out. And if you invent the next great thing, possibly you could become a millionaire. These machines are so tiny they cannot be seen with the eye, and you must have a microscope to see them. Now, don't go by the period that's on the screen because that's been slightly enlarged. But if you look at a period that you write on a paper, in the size or the diameter of that period, you can store over 500 or 300 nano machines. So we're talking extremely, extremely small. And again, when we get into the nanotechnology video, we'll give you more examples of what can be done and what that size is going to be related to. It's a pretty amazing and pretty scary area. Nano machines can be injected into the human body to get information. Many years ago, they developed a pill. So instead of cutting open a body, say that you had a lot of pain and everything in your stomach, the doctor scanned it, they tried to do everything they could, they couldn't fix it. Eventually, they invented a camera pill that they can drop down your body, you swallow it just like a pill, and that would go through and that would take pictures of your stomach, send it to the computer, and the doctor, instead of cutting you open, would look at the problems inside your stomach on the camera pill. And instead of costing maybe $10,000, $15,000 to have an operating room, the camera pill would only cost about $500. That camera then would go through it, by the way, had strobe lights on it too. It would go through your body and eventually come out the same way everything else you eat comes out. We can explore and collect physical data. Say, for example, that you are diabetic. Instead of constantly sticking your finger with a needle and checking your glucose, we can put things in your body that would check that and keep control of that at all times. We think that nanobots can repair your body. For example, strokes and heart attacks are usually caused by the reduction of the size of your veins. So as the blood is flowing through over years and years, that will gradually create plaque and it will get smaller and smaller, making it more difficult for the blood to flow. These nano machines could be injected into your body when you're born, and for your entire life they would simply go through your body, cleaning out your arteries and your veins, making sure they're open and they never get blocked. Perhaps we could eliminate strokes and heart attacks in this manner. You'll never feel these machines in your body. They're far too small to notice. We can also put these nanobots into materials, and they can change the color or the properties of that material based on temperature, light, or any other factor. So, for example, they are working on a nano paint that could be painted on the outside of your house. Very expensive at this point, but eventually, if it got cheap enough, you could do this. And on the outside of your house in the summertime when it's hot, the paint on the side of the house would become a very light white color, and that would reflect the heat and keep your house cooler. In the wintertime, when it's cold outside, the color of your house might become a darker color, absorb the heat from the sun, and make your house warmer. They're already working on nanobots that when you chew gum, it can clean your teeth and kill bacteria. And again, often in my class, students wonder if I'm really sane and if I'm really understanding all the things I'm talking about. And as we look into these areas, we're going to look at videos and we're going to look at information that kind of backs up what I'm talking about in this. Now, in terms of our examples of nanotechnology, we talked about solving illnesses and diseases. What you want to put down for your examples would be stopping diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, and high cholesterol as possible things that we can do. And we're going to keep it simple at this point, and we're going to talk more about those later. Transportation technology is the movement of people and things from one place to another using a vehicle. Now, the key to talking about this in terms of technology is using a vehicle. So, for example, walking from home to school would not be considered transportation, even though we probably could argue that it is. And for our purposes, a vehicle is anything that is man-made. So we're going to kind of limit it in that way just to stay in contact with the book and keep the definition of the book. Your STEM words, trans means across, port to carry, and ion is the act of. So transportation, the act of carrying something across. It could be across the street, across the road, across the city, across the state, across the world. But transportation, again, is all around us. The only two things that we look at transporting would be people and then everything else. And we're not going to limit it or restrict it in any other way other than that. So we only have two things as far as transportation technology that we're going to look at that are transported. Now, examples of transportation you probably learned in kindergarten. And that would be airplanes, cars, ships, trains, elevators, conveyor belts, and just about everything else that is made by man that moves things around. And you're probably already aware of most of these. And they can be as complicated as a space shuttle, which, by the way, we're no longer using, or as simple as a bicycle. The definition of technology is defined as the way people use resources and knowledge to meet their wants and needs and solve problems. And that's a pretty lengthy definition, but again, we're going to go by what's in the textbook, which, since we're online, we're not going to use. Needs are things that we need to survive. And the three main ones are food, water, and shelter. Now, water is probably the most important. You have just a few days to go without some kind of liquid, and you're not going to be able to survive past that. Food, depending on how much fat you have stored up in your body, you can maybe last a week or longer. Shelter, again, depending on where you're at, could be something that's not that important or something that's very critical that you cannot live without it for very long. Students in my class always mention oxygen or air. And that is true. We do need that to survive. But I think the scientists look at it as that's part of our Earth, and without it, our Earth would not be here. So while that is important, we don't really consider that one of our top three needs. Wants are everything else in our world that make our lives better and allow us to have a better life. Heating and air conditioning would be an example of this. Electricity and all the fantastic toys that we get from electricity, flowing water coming to your house and away from your house, and all the incredible materials like nylon and glass and plastic and all of the things that we can do in our homes with all of these materials that we have. Now, most of us could live without these, but it would not be very exciting, and it would not be very fun. If you think about Indiana in the wintertime, gets dark about 5:30 at night, and it stays dark until probably 8:30 the next morning, and you have 15, 16 hours of darkness. Now, my students again in class always say, well, I'm going to get candles out, and that's a good point. We're going to use those candles, but eventually they're going to run out. And then they're going to mention batteries, and again, we're going to use that, but eventually those batteries are going to run out. And then they say, well, we'll go to the store and we'll get more batteries. Well, again, we're going to run out of gas. We can't pump more gas. We have no electricity. The stores won't be working in the ways they are now. It's going to be very difficult to get these materials. One of the big things is flowing water. We're no longer going to be with flowing water. That means no water is going to be coming to your house. You're going to have to find a way to get water. And again, most students think about melting snow, and that's a wonderful idea, and it's going to work very well. But then what do you get rid of all of your waste? You have one flush of your toilet, and once that's done, you're going to have to go outside in the cold and use the bathroom. And fortunately, in the wintertime, that's going to freeze up. But in the summer or in the spring, when that starts to thaw, it's going to be very, very nasty, especially if you live in a housing addition or a large complex with apartments or condos. This is going to be very ugly. So it really allows us in our society today to live close together and to enjoy life in ways that we could never imagine 200, 300 years ago. Now, to wrap this up, we want to talk about a few things. Technology is all around us. It's everywhere. And even if you were to go to a very poor country in the middle of nowhere, they're going to still have some technology. It's not going to be as nice as we have in the United States, but they're still going to have various forms of technology to make your life better. The only things that are not technology are things that are found in nature and any other natural items in addition to rocks, trees, plants, and animals. Technology has increased more since 1950 than the rest of history combined. We've had an incredible amount of new things that have been created since 1950. Almost everything that we have today, as a matter of fact, wasn't around then. An interesting story was in 1930, they decided to close down the patent office because they said, we've already invented everything that can possibly be invented. Well, that's kind of nice thinking, but it's way out of line because we've invented many, many more advances in our world today than they ever dreamed of in 1930. It's predicted that the amount of technology will double every 4 years. Now, if you stop and think about that, if you were an 8th grader, in 4 years you're going to be a senior in high school. And we're going to have twice as much technology then as we do now. Well, what's it going to be? And the answer is nobody knows. If I knew what the technology was going to be in 4 years, I'd buy stock and I'd become wealthy. I don't know, and I don't have any idea. And this might not occur. There could be some kind of natural disaster, and we see these shows all the time on TV, an asteroid hitting the Earth or a massive volcano that blocks out the sun or something along these lines, and that would definitely slow things down and stop our technology. But if we continue at the rate we're going, technology is going to double every 4 years. Technology applies to subjects of math, science, and language arts. And you hear a lot of people and a lot of focus in our society today on math and language arts. And that should be. It is important subjects. But I would be willing to bet that without technology, our lives would be much, much poorer. We wouldn't be able to use the math that we have or the science that we have. We wouldn't be able to share the information with language arts without the technology. And I strongly feel that technology is just as important as those other areas in making the world the way it is now, as well as the way it's going to be in 5, 10, 15, 50 years. So all of these areas interact or interrelate with each other. Science cannot do anything without technology. Technology cannot not have the guidance without science. So all of these areas relate to each other very, very strongly. Technology impacts us all, and there's really not much of a way to get away from it right now. And technology will never stop. Again, if technology stops, the bad news is the world will probably stop also, at least as far as humans are concerned.